Before I get started in my presentation today, I actually wanted to tell a story just because I thought it was really relevant to what we're going to be talking about today, which is transformation of National Journal's business, but this transformation in general. I don't know how many of you have infants or have had infants that are now toddlers, but that is definitely the point in life I'm at. My wife and I, we have a 2.5-year-old. The reason why I'm starting this story out, or starting telling this story, is I want to talk about sleep regressions. We're in the middle of one right now, which is very fun. It's not very fun, but I'm trying to keep a positive spin on it, be optimistic about it. But why it's relevant is it really is a good metaphor for what media businesses are going through a lot in today's environment. You get to a point where you're going smooth, you have an operation that's growing, your profit is stable, and then you hit a sleep regression. At least my son's sleep regression involved him figuring out that he could flip out of his crib and land on his feet. And after marveling at that just for a second and saying maybe I have a really good athlete and being excited about that, I then actually my wife and I then looked at the video or looked back at the video. And I don't know if you've ever seen Jurassic Park, and when they found out that the T-Rex could get out the door, everyone's like, oh no, we have a big problem. I felt like that was my wife and I's experience. However, we quickly adjusted and we were nimble, and we decided to go full into which this is probably like a second or third sleep regression. We thought we had it down. It's been about 9 months where he's been sleeping through the night, but once he figured that out, he started waking up all the time again. So we just switched him to his toddler bed, and all I will say about that is pray for us. The last week has been adventurous, but he'll normalize. He'll get it, and that's my point in this. Sleep regressions are very much like what media companies are going through every year, every couple years now, where you think you're going smooth, you think you have the business model that's going to take you to the future, and then you hit a bump, and you have to figure out what you're going to do. And often figuring out what you're going to do is just saying, you know what, I'm going to lean into this, and this is an opportunity to really figure out what the next couple years of our business is going to be, and being willing to be nimble, to be innovative. And then the business, it'll normalize, it'll smooth out, but you always have to be ready for those sleep regression moments. So I start out with that story really to set up National Journal's story, because we went through a really big sleep regression probably about 7 years ago in our business. So I start out by just starting with the transformation. What were we? In 2010, really, from 1969 to 2010, National Journal was a business that was established in the Washington, D.C. market. We served government affairs professionals. We also served all of Congress, all of the executive office of the president, as well as a lot of the federal agencies. And we really had a nice business. What we were serving them with was a traditional media company. We published 3 different brands. One was called National Journal Magazine, which was our print magazine. The hotline was, it started as a fax that would be sent out to all of our subscribers, but it eventually became a push email and a digital website. And then we had a daily newsletter that covered Congress. We added a live events business along the line. All of these were good businesses for us. We were growing. Again, we were going along smoothly, and we were at scale. Then we hit a bumpy moment, and I'll talk about that bumpy moment in the coming slides. But what it pushed us to become and what we are today is an information services company. And what that means is we actually do still publish our media brands, all but the magazine. We did make the decision to close our print magazine, but we still publish our daily publication in print and online. And we also still publish the Hotline, which had switched to being all digital some years before and continues to be a great publication for us. But with that, we started launching new businesses. So the first thing we launched was a slide service. We call it the Presentation Center, and I'll talk a little bit more about that innovation later on. And we also launched a advisory division within our company. So for all intents and purposes, it's a consulting group. And we consult with heads of government affairs in the Washington, D.C. market. And that has really returned great growth to us and has helped us get through our bumpy moment. So setting that up, I thought it would be helpful just for everyone to see our revenue mix and what it was in 2010. And this, again, was right when we started to feel the bumps in our business. We, again, looked like a traditional media company. We had advertising. Advertising was probably about 45% of our business. We had about 50% of the business was subscriptions. And then we had started to launch some of the advisory services at that point. And it was a small piece of our business. Now it's a much bigger piece of our business. What's helpful in seeing this is we were probably the business that a lot of publishers are moving to today. We were already in that business where you had this mix of advertising and subscriptions. In fact, I was reading a story the other day about a growing media company and their plans to grow, and they're advertising sponsored now, and almost their entire plan in the future was to start a subscription business. And their plan to scale was to start a subscription business. And we talked about that a little earlier in some of the earlier presentations. That was our business. We actually got disrupted out of that business, which is an interesting story. What do you do when you get disrupted out of the place that everyone is going? So how did we get disrupted? It really was a double whammy. I look back at it and said we probably had everything that could go wrong to a business that, again, was going along pretty well that could possibly go wrong. So one, we had increased competition in our market. Our market became attractive to a number of competitors that were moving in and launching new products. And when you launch new products, it's actually a really good place to be because you're going from zero to whatever you can get, and you can scale as you go along. When you're the incumbent in that market, it really does shake your financials, and we had to respond to that. The other dynamic that was going on in our business was the recession. So the recession had hit our market at the same time that competitors were coming in. And again, being in the incumbent, when a recession hits, especially a subscription subscriptions usually move into nice to have when you're having to make budget cuts. That hurt our business from the subscription side. But I like to use this analogy for our business, which is we had a cookie in a niche market because the government affairs market is a very niche market, but we had a cookie that really was feeding two competitors. I think we mentioned one of the competitors earlier. CQ Roll Call and National Journal were the two big players in the DC government affairs data and information market. And we both could exist. We were friendly with each other. We competed, but we were very friendly, only because both our businesses could be successful at the same time. And in fact, we shared a lot of the same customers. Their customers would buy National Journal customers would buy CQ Roll Call. But when the economy got shaky, that cookie became smaller. This because you had some organizations that decided they were pulling out of government affairs. You had some organizations that decided that they were pulling back greatly on the amount of resources they were investing, at least in information resources, to the government affairs groups. And then you had increased competition. So with that increased competition and a smaller market, at least a smaller spend in the market, even if the same amount of government affairs groups existed, but we did see some government affairs groups that shut down and decided to handle it all through consulting. That became a tough business environment for us. So we had a decision to make. So I love this slide because it's a good illustration of our decision. Our decision was, we could say, look, we got disrupted. It's a tough economic environment, so the value proposition you have to make is tougher, but we could invest fully in competing with the organizations that disrupted us. And it was going to take a large investment, but we knew what we had to do. But really, that decision would have been us going or running towards a smaller market that has increased competition and then trying to just get our fair share of a smaller, again, cookie. Or we can make the decision to really take the tougher route, which is to lick our wounds and say, look, we got disrupted out of a market, and they got us, they beat us. Now, let's think about how we can serve this market in a different way. Let's go to a place where there isn't a lot of competition. Let's go to a need that isn't being met by any other organization. And that became the decision that we made. So as you can see, we could have run the race, and you win some races, you lose some races, but there's always going to be a lot of people in the race. So your odds are you're going to lose some, and hopefully you're hoping you can invest, you can make the right decisions, you can pick the right horse to win the race. Or you can be on the track by yourself and you're just test driving. And sometimes your test drive will be a little off and you just adjust some things to get your test drive right. And we just wanted to be on a track by ourselves and setting our own pace. And then when we were ready, we could really press the accelerator. So the thing that we leaned into when we decided that, look, we really need to remake our business. We need to reimagine what National Journal is. We need to reimagine our value proposition. Well, where you need to start when you do that is you have to start with market exploration. You really have to lean into what are the market's needs? What are their pain points? What's interesting to them? What's helpful to them? What are the jobs they're having to get done that they didn't need to get done 2 years ago, 5 years ago? Let's go out and find that out. Let's spend time with our market. So it was mentioned in my introduction, one of the first things we did, and I was involved in this and leading this strategy, is we started an advisor group of some of the top leaders in our market, and we spent a year with them. So we asked them to be advisors at first and spent a year showing them different product concepts. But before we got to product concepts, all we did was ask them questions and listen. And the questions, and these aren't all the questions, but these are representative of the questions that you want to be asking a market when you're trying to figure out, well, how can I recreate my value proposition? What else can I be doing for a market? What keeps you awake at night? We love that question. Because it gets to the heart of what are the leaders thinking about in your specific market? What are the readers? What's your audience thinking about when they go to bed? What do they come into when they come into their office in the morning? What is the thing that's driving their day? What drives their agenda? What's their boss asking them to do? What's keeping you up at night? What is the top challenge you want to solve in your role? So what are they planning for? What are their strategic planning meetings around? In their last review, what did their boss ask them to improve on? What are the top 3 strategic priorities of your role? That plays into the same thing that I just mentioned. And then what information would enable you to make faster and better decisions? Answers to those questions really feed where your product needs to go. So I've never had an advisor or someone in our market, well, I have, but it's usually something that's very specific to them and it won't scale. I've never had someone say, this is the product that you actually should be doing. This is the thing that I'll buy tomorrow. They're not wired that way. But what they can tell you is, this is the thing that I don't know how to do, or I struggle to do, or this takes me way too much time, and I wish I could be spending more time on other things. And that gives you the data, the information, the pieces that you can put together and make products that can help change your organization, that can help you get to the next level of value proposition that you're searching for. So through that process, what we discovered were a host of unmet challenges for our market. I actually think the top one, time famine, I'm a big fan of this one. And I think it actually applies across every sector, not just media. If you think about the successful businesses that are in our economy right now, especially the tech companies, they all serve this need, time famine. Google, Apple, they all center their products around how can I save someone time? How can I make their days more efficient? And that is something that we found in our market. And we leaned heavily into that feedback. And in fact, right now, every product that we launch, I ask my product team now, how's this saving people time? How can we make that case? Because that's really important. Because that is something that plugs right into someone's workflow. And it's really easy to make that value proposition case if you can prove that. We found that they needed to filter and explain information. We also found that identifying and employing industry best practices was something that they were searching for, especially as the demands on their industry were changing. What they were being asked for in their presentations and their board meetings were changing, and they wanted to make sure that they're responding to that information in the right way, or those requests in the right way. So this is where the fun part came in. As I said, we took a year doing this. It did take some time. We had to commit to market research. The trends in our business weren't changing in that year, so we were leaning into the bump, but we thought we were making a long-term investment that would pay off for us. So we got the product. And when I said in the last slide that we leaned into the time-saving element, one thing we heard is, at least our market, they were spending a lot of time doing presentations. They were briefing headquarters, just because we were dealing with corporate heads of government affairs or trade associations where they needed to brief their members. And they were spending a lot of time creating those presentations. And we actually got this one specific piece of feedback, I was sharing it with a group earlier, that unlocked this product that we created called the Presentation Center.